Welcome back to Passport to Possibility. Not long ago, we did a video on the US decision to pause immigrant visa processing for nationals of 75 countries under the public charge rules, and a follow-up aimed at Jennifer's clients explaining what it means for tourists, students, and Caribbean citizenship by investment citizens. Today, we want to move from news to planning. We're going to look at a few common client scenarios and show how tools like Caribbean CBI, Grenada E2, Sierra Leone, and citizenship by descent can fit together into a real plan B. If you want to stay on top of these changes, don't forget to subscribe so you get our future updates on citizenship by investment, residency, and descent. Let's get into it. Jennifer, before we get into scenarios, can you quickly remind viewers what the US has actually done with this visa freeze?
The US has suspended immigrant visa processing for nationals of 75 countries while it reassesses how it applies the public charge rules. These are visas that often lead to permanent residence. It hasn't announced a blanket ban on non-immigrant visas like tourism, study, or E2, though consular officers still have discretion in individual cases. So many immigration plans are in limbo, but lawful travel, study, and alternative planning are still very much possible.
So green card routes are on hold for many, but visiting, studying, and exploring other plans are still very much on the table. How worried should people be about this? Is this a temporary bump or a sign of a bigger trend?
It's both. In immediate terms, it's a serious disruption for families. The families in the affected countries who are far along in the immigrant visa process. But it also fits a broader pattern we've discussed in other videos, borders becoming more digital, more data-driven, and more selective. Rather than panic, the productive response is to recognize that dependency on a single route, or that dependency on a single route or country is risky, and to build additional lawful options, and that's where the planning pieces come in.
Right, so this is a wake-up call about concentration risk, not a reason to despair if you respond with proper planning. Let's walk through the first scenario. An entrepreneur from one of the 75 countries who had hoped to move to the US on an immigrant visa. What can planning look like now?
We usually build 3 layers. First, we look at strong second citizenship to diversify mobility and banking and reduce single passport risk. Second, if a viable US business is realistic, we might explore E2 via Grenada as a non-immigrant way to spend time in the US and direct that business with full understanding that it's not guaranteed or permanent residence. And third, we widen the lens beyond the US, perhaps a European residency by investment or an EU ancestry route like Italian or Irish citizenship that offers comparable or even better long-term opportunities.
So instead of one blocked US green card path, they build a 3-layer plan: new citizenship, potential E2, and strong alternatives beyond the US. Second scenario. A UK, Australian, Canadian, or EU citizen who isn't directly affected but doesn't like the direction of travel you've described in the UK and US videos. How do you approach that?
So we could potentially start with ancestry, can strengthen their base by formalizing any EU citizenship by descent. Then we consider adding an external second citizenship, often that's Caribbean, for extra mobility and risk diversification. We might also bring in a residency by investment, whether that's Portugal, Greece, the UAE, or another jurisdiction that provides a concrete plan B in a place where you can live. And it's about shifting from, I hope my country doesn't change too much, to I have options if it does.
Right, so they move from passive hope to active choice, anchoring themselves with extra citizenships and a real plan B residence. Third scenario, families thinking in terms of their children and grandchildren. What does post-freeze planning look like for them?
We design a multi-step pathway. In the short term, that might be Caribbean citizenship to increase flexibility. Medium term, we work on ancestry-based citizenship for their children or parents. Long term, we might add other elements, African or emerging market citizenship, strategic residences, to create a blend of options across regions. And we also think about education and residence. Can the next generation be positioned in a country to study or live in more than one system? So that flexibility is often more valuable than any single visa.
Right, so for families, the goal is multi-decade, multi-jurisdiction, a multi-jurisdiction plan that gives the next generation real choices. How does risk tolerance and timing play into these plans? Not everyone wants to move tomorrow.
Risk tolerance determines how many moving parts a client is comfortable with and how quickly. Some want to act immediately and secure 2 or 3 statuses within a couple of years, and others prefer a slower staged approach, perhaps starting with ancestry, then adding CBI later. Our job is to match the plan to both their objectives and their comfort level, so it's realistic and sustainable rather than overwhelming.
So you calibrate the plan to the person, how fast they want to move and how much complexity they're comfortable managing. For someone watching who feels anxious but stuck, what does working with you actually involve?
We begin with a detailed mapping of their current position, citizenships, residences, family tree assets, businesses, and goals, and then we identify a menu of realistic options. Ancestry, CBI, residency by investment, and special routes like Grenada E2, or for some that might even mean Sierra Leone or Sao Tome and Principe. And from there, we build a sequence with timelines and documentation so they know exactly what can happen in year 1, year 3, year 5. And the aim is to replace uncertainty and headline-driven fear with a clear, lawful, step-by-step plan.
So you turn "I'm worried" into "here's my 3 to 5 year roadmap" with concrete steps and timelines. So the takeaway after the US visa freeze isn't panic, it's planning. The world is becoming more permission-based, and the people who do best are those who build multiple lawful options ahead of time. If you haven't yet watched our earlier videos on Caribbean citizenship by investment in 2026, Grenada and E2, Sierra Leone, or citizenship by descent, these will give you the building blocks we've been talking about today. And if you want help turning this into a personalised plan, you'll find Jennifer's contact details in the description. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our next round of updates, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Appreciate it.